If you are new to IELTS speaking, or even if you have done the speaking test before and you still have doubts or questions about it, then this guide for beginners is for you. Let's do it. Hello, my name is Keith from English Speaking Success, and I also run the website and the Keith Speaking Academy, here to help you speak better English, give better answers, and get a higher score on the IELTS speaking test. So in this video, I'm going to explain, the different parts of the test, what happens in the different parts, and also give you some tips so that you can sail through the test. Sail through the test. I mean, go smoothly through the test. So you can sail through the test and get the score that you want in IELTS speaking. Also, at the end of the video, I will give you some resources that can help you prepare for the IELTS speaking test. So stick around for those. Now, the first tip that I will give you for free is the following. The most important thing in IELTS speaking is to work on improving your overall spoken English. I think you should practice often and over time to build up your confidence, right? Exam tips and techniques, yes, they're helpful, but really they're just the tip of the iceberg. No pun intended. What's really important, is your overall spoken English skills. That's where you should focus. So don't book your test until you're confident you have the right level of spoken English. Another thing I think is really important is I'm going to ask you today, as of today, to start thinking of being a confident English speaker, not a bored, frustrated student, Change your mindset. Start to think, I am a confident English speaker. Like many exams, IELTS, it's in the head. It's a mindset. If you think you can do well, you probably will. Okay, great. Let's get started. So, IELTS speaking, what is it? Well, it's one of the 4 parts of the IELTS test, There's reading, listening, writing, and speaking. Each one makes up 25% of the total score. IELTS, of course, is the International English Language Testing System, and it's an exam that is developed to give an accurate assessment of your English language proficiency, which is important if you're going to study abroad or work abroad in an English-speaking environment. Now, there are 2 types of test. There's the academic test and the general test. The academic test is more for people who are going to study abroad or possibly register for a professional organisation. The vast majority of people take the academic test. There's also the general test, which is more for people either going to immigrate, and in fact, if you're going to Australia, New Zealand, Canada, or the UK, IELTS is a requirement, or if you're going to work abroad in an English-speaking environment. What's important is the IELTS speaking test is the same for both the academic and the general module. Now, when you book your test, and nowadays you can book online or you can call your local test centre. That's going to be either IDP or the British Council. Then you'll be given a date for your exam. Normally, in most countries, the writing, the reading and the listening all happen together on the same day. And then the speaking is either later in the day or earlier in the day or even on a different day, It's taken separately. Some students do ask me, Keith, IDP or British Council, which is easier? They're both the same because they don't write the test. Cambridge Assessment write the test. It's the same test for everybody. IDP and British Council deliver the test. So of course you'll get different people, but it's the same test, so it doesn't matter. Don't sweat the small stuff, okay? Focus on your IELTS preparation. So just to be clear, IELTS speaking, right, is a test of your natural spoken conversational English, not formal academic English. So when the examiner asks you, where do you live? Don't say, I reside in a tall urban dwelling in London. Nobody speaks like that. No, I live in a flat in London. Make it natural. Focus on being natural. Of course, you can embellish. You can say, I live in a beautiful flat, which is slap bang in the centre of London. Great, but keep it natural, spoken English. Okay, how does the examiner evaluate your English exactly? Let's find out. So the examiner is looking at 4 different things: your fluency, your vocabulary, your grammar, and your pronunciation. Each one accounts for 25%. Okay. Your fluency is basically how easily you keep going, right? Can you carry on speaking? Da, 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 da. Or do you hesitate a lot? Is there a lot of repetition? I think I, things like that. Vocabulary, right, is the range of vocabulary and the accuracy. Are you making a lot of mistakes? You need a balance between having lots of vocabulary but using it well. Vocabulary will include things like collocations, phrasal verbs are very important in spoken English. Idiomatic expressions are also important, and things like that. Grammar also, the examiner's looking for the range of grammar. Are you using simple and complex structures? And mistakes, are you using them accurately? Finally, pronunciation is your control of the features of pronunciation and how easy it is for the examiner to understand you. So the features include things like word stress, sentence stress, connected speech, intonation, weak and strong forms. At the end of the day, the first thing the examiner is asking himself or herself is, can I understand this person easily? So work on your pronunciation as well. But fear not, because I have got a complete guide for each of these 4 areas on my website. Check the link below. Now, an important thing to remember, right, is you cannot fail or pass IELTS. You just get a result that shows your level. The level goes on a range from, 0 up to 9. Don't worry about 0. 0 is basically when you didn't go to the test and you get a 0. It normally goes from band 1, which is somebody who cannot communicate, what IELTS calls a non-user. There's no communication possible. Right up to a band 9, which is the best. Band 9 is completely fluent, similar to a native speaker, what IELTS calls an expert user. Okay. Most people to get into university or immigration are looking at something like a band 6 or a band 7, maybe a bit higher, depending on exactly what you're going to do. What you need to do is check with the organization, for example, the university where you're going. Make sure you check what they require, or the immigration office that you need to apply to. If you want to know more about the different bands and what ability corresponds to each level, again, check in the link below to the public band descriptors. You can find out all about that there. Let's talk next about the different parts of the test. So the speaking test is a live test with an examiner, right? You're not speaking into a computer. It's you and an examiner, a real person, one-on-one in a room together. Scary for some people, right? don't worry. It's a face-to-face exam. During the pandemic, of course, some things changed. There were times in some countries that the examiner and the student had to wear a face mask. That may still apply. And also video conferencing, like a Zoom call, was used in some cases to do the test. Actually, that's going to become more common because in 2022 and beyond, IELTS Online is coming, where you will be able to do the test from the comfort of your own home. Well, not that comfy, but you'll be able to do the test online, and IELTS Speaking will be done with a kind of a Zoom call or a video conference. That's coming. So that's also an interesting and a useful way of practicing your IELTS speaking tests. Just to be clear, the test is one-on-one. I know some Cambridge tests you have 2 candidates together speaking. This is not the case. This is you and the examiner. It's a question-answer format. The examiner asks, you answer. You don't get to ask questions, right? Although in part 3, if you don't understand something, you can ask the examiner, right? You can say, well, don't say I don't understand, because that is like a big red flag saying my level's not very high. I would say something like, I don't quite follow. Can you explain that? Or, what do you mean by da, 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 right? I mean, if the examiner says, you know, what is the future of AI? What do you mean by AI? Oh, artificial intelligence. Okay, right. So it's absolutely fine now and again to just check your understanding with the examiner in part 3. So it's probably more like an interview rather than a conversation, right? Some students have asked me about, what if I have a speech impediment? Now that may be a stammer or some other medical problem with your speaking. That's fine. You must let IELTS know when you register. Let the test centre know before you do the test, right? Not on the day of the test. Let them know beforehand, and they will take measures to support you to do the test, such as giving you more time to answer. Okay. Also, the test is recorded with an MP3 recorder, so don't be surprised when the examiner starts recording, right? Don't think, oh, what have I done wrong? Why is he recording me? No, it's perfectly natural. And the test will last from 11 to 14 minutes. It's divided into 3 parts. Each part has a different goal, an objective, or a testing objective. And it's important you understand that so you have a different approach for each part. Let's look now at the 3 different parts, beginning with part 1. So, part 1. At the beginning, the examiner will check your ID and check your name. And then there's a kind of a warm-up. So there'll be 1 or 2 introductory questions about either your work, your study, your home, or your hometown. After that, there will be 2 more topics and probably 2 to 4 questions on each topic. Topics like your hobbies or food, things like that. Now, you may feel there's a lot of questions in a short time in part 1. It can feel a bit like a quick fire approach. So the important thing is that you give a short answer. You can develop a little bit, but I would say 2 to 3 sentences, maybe 10 to 20 seconds. But don't worry if the examiner interrupts you. That will happen. The most important thing is part 1 is all about you. It's about your life experiences, things that you do, right? They'll be asking questions like, well, what food do you like? Well, I love eating fish and chips, of course. Not true. But it's about you and your experience, right? If you want more tips on the introduction part of part 1, check out this video up here. Lots of great ideas. Now, my tips for part 1 are the following. Do a bit of research and be prepared to talk about the most common topics that come up. Give short answers. Give direct answers, right? Don't give long-winded, around the houses, rambling answers. Be direct. Talk about you and your life. Relax. At the beginning of the test, it's your chance to get attuned to the examiner's voice, to warm up a little bit. So don't make it too complicated. Keep it simple at the beginning. Be careful with yes/no questions. It is tempting to say yes or no, right? But you mustn't. So if the examiner says, "Do you like cooking?" Yes, I do. You need to develop a little bit, right? Give a little bit more. Yes, I do. I'm a big fan of roasting, actually. I love to do a roast lamb on the weekend. Develop your answers a little bit. Also, do notice that the questions in part 1 are scripted. So the examiner has to follow the questions. At times, this can sound a little strange. Don't worry about it. So the examiner may say, "Do you like cooking?" "No, I don't, not at all." "Okay, and what kind of food do you cook?" "I just told you, I don't like cooking. Are you listening to me?" Don't say that, right? You want to say something like, "Well, as I just mentioned, I'm not a big fan of cooking. Actually, it's my wife who is the one who cooks in our house." Right? Be polite. The examiner is just following the questions. Okay, great. Let's move on. So next, part 2. This is sometimes called the long turn because you have 1 to 2 minutes to talk about a topic, a long period of time, right? So here, obviously, the examiner is looking for your fluency. Can you keep talking for a long time? They'll be looking, of course, at the range of vocabulary that you're using, as well as the range of grammar and what kind of mistakes you're making. Okay. It's most likely that at the end of part 1, the examiner will have an idea whether you are a 3 or a 4, or maybe a 6 or a 7. By the end of part 2, they're probably pretty much decided that you're not a 7, you're a 6. And in part 3, they'll confirm whether they're right. So part 2 is important, right? It can be the make or break moment of your test. Actually, all parts of the test are important because you are evaluated across the whole test, right? Not just on one part. That said, let's have a look in detail at part 2. What happens here? Well, the examiner will give you a task card, sometimes called a cue card. Here you are. Oh, thank you. And they will say something like, "I'd like you to describe something important which you own." Here is an example of a typical cue card. So you've got the main title and then 3 bullet points to discuss and talk further, and finally wind up with explain something like why it is important to you. So you will have 1 minute to prepare your talk. It's really important you make good use of that minute. You'll be given a piece of paper and a pencil so you can make notes, and you can keep the notes and the task card in front of you whilst you're speaking, right? Keep hold of them. They're useful. My tip is here in the 1 minute preparation, as quickly as you can, decide what you're going to talk about, right? Something important to me. Oh gosh, my house, my car, my telephone. Right. I'm going to talk about that. Decide that. And then in the remaining time, just go through the bullet points and decide the content of each part, right? So maybe you're going to talk about where I got it from was this shop in England. How long ago? Okay, that was maybe 4 years ago. And what I use it for? Well, for emails, for texting, for calling family. ba, 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 ba. And then, so you've got a structure. The structure in your notes is so important. You don't have time to write down a lot of detail, but at least have a structure to follow. Okay. And don't worry about answering all of the bullet points, right? You can, but you don't have to. So don't worry if you miss one out. It's okay. It doesn't matter. Trust me. When you're talking, you are allowed to talk between 1 and 2 minutes. I suggest you try and talk as much as you can. Try and talk for the whole 2 minutes, even until the examiner cuts you off, right? If possible. Don't worry if you finish early. The examiner will ask you a follow-up question just to wind up the session. But this is your opportunity to speak out for a long turn. Take the opportunity. My other tips for part 2 are, when you start, have your first sentence ready in your head. Before you start speaking, pause, stop, and breathe. I'm going to talk to you about, right? Take that moment to ground yourself before you speak. Don't speak too fast. Control your speed. Some students ask me, can I use idioms in part 2? In fact, in the whole test? Well, yes, and you should be using some idioms. I mean, don't use too many, but you should be using idiomatic expressions, right? That's a key part of natural spoken English. Other students ask me, can I use wanna, gonna, shoulda? Yes, this again is natural spoken English. Informal English. You should be speaking like that. You should be making contractions like that. Right, that's it for part 2. Let's move on to the final nerve-wracking part 3. Now, part 3, well, lasts 4 to 5 minutes and it comes so quickly, like a train down the track. Right? No sooner have you handed back the task card than the examiner will say, so, we've been talking about something which is important to you, and now I want to go on to ask you some questions related to that. And boom, you're straight into part 3. So it's really important. Stay focused. There's no break, okay? Now in part 3, as I mentioned, the examiner is going to take the same topic as part 2 and go into more depth. Okay, so typically they will take 1 or 2 subtopics related to that theme and ask you maybe 2 or 3 questions for each subtopic. But it's all on the same theme as part 2. So if in part 2 your question was describe a road trip that you've taken, part 3 may look at a subtopic like cars and the environment, right? For example, how does driving affect the environment? Will electronic cars become more popular in the future? So here, and what you need to do is to develop your ideas. Do you remember at the start I talked about each part of the test needs a different approach? So in part 1, you're talking about yourself. In part 3, you're talking about more abstract and general ideas. You need to be able to evaluate ideas, speculate about the future, hypothesize, justify your opinion. All of these different functions are so important when you develop your answers. Now, as I mentioned, the test, part 3, is normally 4 to 5 minutes. You may get a total of 4 or 5 questions. So you can see each answer could be anything from 30 seconds up to maybe a minute, depending, right? It's not mathematics. Some questions may be longer. Some answers can be longer, some can be shorter. But make sure you're developing your answers. If you want more tips about part 3, I've got more videos up here that you can watch to go into more detail. I would just say finally on part 3, right, don't worry if the examiner interrupts you. It always happens. It's not good or bad. They're just doing the test. You just focus on your answers, okay? Also, the examiner in part 3 may be making up questions based on your answers to probe you and push you further. So just be aware that you may have to justify what you're saying. And then at the end of the test, the examiner does not give you a score, right? Not at the end of the test. You just say thank you. They will tell you it's finished, time for leaving, adios, goodbye, and you go. And that's it. And good luck with your test. So we've seen the format of the test, how it's evaluated, and the 3 different parts. How can you prepare for the IELTS speaking test? Good question. Let's have a look. Now, if you're preparing for IELTS speaking, you're most probably also preparing for the reading, writing, and listening papers. So I think a great resource you should have is the Cambridge IELTS practice tests, books 1 to 16. There's the academic books and the general books. Of course, for speaking, it's all the same. And doing practice tests, especially for speaking, is great because it's like you get used to the exam conditions. You get used to the timing. You get used to the pressure, like the real exam. And do them with a clock, right? Time yourself under exam conditions. If you want to find speaking practice tests, Cambridge books have them. You can also go to takeielts.britishcouncil.org and the IELTS.org website. All have speaking practice tests. And they're all good resources. Of course, for speaking, you can also explore my YouTube channel, English Speaking Success, which is not only full of tips, but it's also full of the language that you need to succeed in IELTS speaking. On my website, Key Speaking Academy, you've got lots of free live lessons on every topic under the sun. Every topic you can imagine that comes up in IELTS speaking, it's on the website. You can check out all the links down below. You may want to, and I think this is a good idea, is to do practice with other people. iTalki is a great platform for that. Cambly is another where you can find teachers and practice with them. iTalki is a bit more flexible. You pay as you go. Cambly, you buy a package and you invest in a kind of a longer term of learning. But both of them are great. Also, if you want to study at your own pace with an online course in the comfort of your home, I also have an online course. It's IELTS Speaking Success. Get a Band 7 Plus, ding, gold. And it's full not only of strategies for the IELTS test, but it actually gives you the language you need to improve your spoken English. It's based on the Speaking Success system, which is a system of practicing chunks I've developed over the years. So you get lots of practice within the course, as well as the strategies, the tips, 2 live lessons a month, and a private Facebook group. It's all happening. IELTS Speaking Success, get a Band 7 Plus gold. Go and check it out in the link below. Guys, that's it. I hope this has been useful for you. If you're preparing and getting ready for IELTS and you're a beginner, this gives you a good idea of what to expect. If you like the video, like it, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. Leave me a comment if you have any questions about IELTS speaking and I will get back to you. In the meantime, go and watch the next video, which will give you 15 useful phrases to impress the IELTS examiner. Thanks for watching, my friend. Take care. Bye-bye.